never in a million years anticipated that. And that day, the word of Project Rachel went around the world. Around the world in one day. I got letters from other countries saying, tell us how to do this. But it wasn't until 2 years ago when I was in Lourdes that I discovered something. And what I discovered is that September 19th, which is the day it went around the world, is a very important Marian feast day. It's a feast of Our Lady. And it's the feast of Our Lady of La Salette, the consolation of sinners. She's a weeping Madonna. And everything that happened important in Project Rachel over the years always happened on a feast day of Our Lady, because this is very much Mary's ministry. Mary understood the pain of a mother facing a pregnancy that is not exactly how it's supposed to be. She had to go away. She didn't have Jesus at home with her family, which she should have been. And then they had to flee to another country. They were immigrants. They had to come back. They started over. Tradition has it she was a single mother. And then she beheld her dead son. Mary understands the pain of a mother's heart. But the awareness of that and how necessary it is in our world, again, goes hand in hand with what Father Art is talking about. Not only do we need to be prophetic, but we have to provide people the means to recover. All right? There are just briefly, more than 50 million abortions in the world every year. In this country, there's been more than 50 million. It isn't only the woman that's touched, it's the men. Tonight I'm going to tell you guys, you're changed by pregnancy. Of course a man would suffer after an abortion, okay? Grandparents, brothers and sisters, I'm going to explain why we all know that. We are in the loop in that loss, okay? I believe there's not a person in the United States that doesn't know someone who's had an abortion. They might not know who it is, but they know somebody who's been involved, okay? Now, what I want to talk to you about tonight, all right? Now I can go to my board. Are we good? All right. Okay. The latest fashion statement. What I want to talk to you about tonight is really the essence of the beginning of life. Okay? You're all going, boring. I promise you it won't be boring. I promise that you in this room are going to learn something that you have never heard before. And if you didn't, then you can see Debbie about getting your money back. Okay? But this is such an important piece. And how did I come upon it? I stumbled upon it by accident because I had gone to a conference to learn about how to help women who'd had abortions bond better to the next pregnancy, because they're very frightened and it's very difficult. And on the way home, I was reading a book called The Anthropology of Mothering. And it explained something to me that happened as a mother that I didn't know why this was. And what had happened to me is when I had our fourth child, I met a woman down the block who just had her fourth child, and we spent a lot of time together. We babysat for each other, we walked our kids to school, we did all that kind of stuff. Well, when we had our fifth kids, they were born within a month of each other, but when we had our sixth kids, they were due the same day. And she and I were on a parish council together, and I said to the parish council, you know, the March meeting is going to have to be at St. Mary's Hospital because Joan and I are going to be there. And they all laughed and went, aren't they cute? You know, that's the dumbest thing we've ever heard. Well, this is how it really happened. I went to the hospital at midnight on March 23rd, and my daughter Miriam was born at 7 a.m. Before she was born, my friend Joan was there, and she was in labor. But John took a nap, and so he was born on the 25th. But I will tell you, there are twins that are born on different days, okay? I thought that was the weirdest thing in the world. I could not explain this. I didn't understand it. I did know that sometimes in families, sister-in-laws or sisters will have babies kind of at the same time, okay? But what's that about, you know? Well, what this book explained to me is that we women cycle together based on some scent hormones, and so it's critical that we have children at the same time if these are with women that we spend time with. Now, why would that be? Does that not seem strange? Because in the very old days, we women lived in a community with our children and other women, and you guys were out hunting. And I'll say more about that in a minute. You were out hunting, but we were living in the community. We didn't have bottles, we didn't have formula. If I died, there had to be a woman in the community invested enough in my baby that she would nurse my baby or my child would not survive, okay? That's the premise of this. The reality is that we are still Stone Age people who are living in a very high-tech world. And there are many things that go on around us that we're oblivious to. We just have no idea, all right? You know, you women, if you're conscious of this, if you've got good friends, you know you get your periods together. Or you live in a family with a bunch of sisters, you're all pretty close on in terms of that. Why? Because we set each other off, okay? So that's how this talk came to be. I was so intrigued by this that I started reading more and more, and the more I read, the more annoyed I got because nobody had ever told any of us this stuff. And I thought, somebody's got to be telling people this. Well, the women who were calling me who'd had abortions oftentimes got pregnant the first time they had sex, and they were told that wasn't supposed to happen. But I explained to them why it was quite likely it would happen, as a matter of fact. All right? And so that's where this talk came from. And I'm just going to present a lot of material, but again, there'll be questions at the end. But I think that you're going to find this stuff to be really interesting, again, because it's stuff I would be willing to bet that most of you who are in high school haven't heard this stuff in your health classes, okay? We sort of touch on it, but we don't really do much with it. And this is stuff that helps us to make better decisions in terms of our life, okay? I will tell you that having picked up the pieces of many, many, many women and men's lives after abortion, that I wouldn't wish that on anyone. The pain is there forever. And I'll explain to you why it's impossible to forget. But if we can help people to make good choices so they don't have to go there, it's a win on every count, in my opinion. Okay? Now, I want to start by saying to you, again, how intertwined our lives are, because we kind of think, we live in this society, we're all tough, rugged individuals, all right? The Chinese say that we are much more likely to get the diseases of our grandmothers than our mothers, all right? Why is that? Because when we women are in our mom, at 20 weeks after conception, okay, about halfway through a pregnancy, we already have 6 million ovum, all right? Time we're born, we're down to 2 million. And by the time we get our period, we have about 400 to 450,000 ovum left, all right? By the time we get to menopause, all of our ovum are gone, all right? Now, when grandma is pregnant with mom, whatever is happening in grandma's body is going directly through mom to these ovum, all right? If I'm stressed, if I'm sick, if I'm frightened, if I'm happy, it changes the environment of the body. We used to say, oh, no problem. The placenta is many, many cells thick. It's a big barrier. No, it's only 2 cells thick, and it's a sponge. So what the chemistry of mom is the chemistry of her baby in utero, and that then impacts all of us, okay? So what was going on with grandma was impacting you already before you were ever conceived, all right? How do these cells die off? Because you see that they're clearly dying off there. They're dying off through something called apoptosis, and it's exactly what it says, pop. The cells simply pop and are reabsorbed by the body. This is not a disease state, it's normal. They say our body redoes itself every 7 years. Why? Through that, okay? Those of you who have seen movies of babies in utero, how we all used to look, at one point your hand was fused like this. You didn't have fingers yet. And we think the fingers grow. It's not that the fingers grow, it's that they split. Okay, that's apoptosis. I don't know if any of you are aware of the fact that you might have webbed toes. You may never have looked. Go home tonight, look. You'll see that there's webbing. They're not split all the way down. What's that? It's incomplete apoptosis, all right? In our family, one of my daughters has webbed toes. And it was very funny. She's the oldest one, and her godmother came over one time when she was a baby and is doing, well, where in the world did she get that? I mean, I don't know anybody with webbed toes. And then I looked at my sister-in-law's feet and said, well, apparently it's on your side of the family. She'd never noticed, okay. But this awareness that this isn't a disease state, but this is a naturally occurring dying off of cells, okay? Now, there's something else I want to say about how interrelated we are. So we're related, in terms of grandma, and there's a whole unfolding field, by the way, called epigenetics. And what that means is that what happens in my body impacts my ovum, and for you men, it impacts your sperm. And it changes how the genetics will be made manifest. It doesn't change the genetics, it just changes what's turned on and off. And we didn't think that this mattered for men, but we know now, for instance, with some studies that were done, if a male was exposed to a certain fungicide, a father, that there's a history then of prostate cancer from that man to his son, and maybe to the 4th generation. It's a very clear line, all right? It's not the only cause of prostate cancer, but it's very interesting that it isn't only the woman's body, okay? Now, the other thing that's very interesting in terms of how we're all interconnected is that everybody in the world, how's that for a grand statement, carries the mitochondria of their mothers. What's that? Those are the energy cells, the energy bodies in our cells. Everybody, there's no one in the world who has the mitochondria of their father's mother. Period, end of discussion. It falls away when the baby's conceived. There's a guy by the name of Brian Sykes who wrote a book called The 7 Daughters of Eve, who went further and discovered that that mitochondria can be traced back to 7 women in history, with the implication that there is an Eve. It all started somewhere. And National Geographic is involved in doing this. You can send about them, it's about $100, get a little, like a Q-tip, you take a little cheek sample, you send it to them, and they will tell you which of the 7 lines of women, and they will also tell you how these women migrated through the world. Ancient, all right? But then he was at a conference and there was a guy who said to him, you know, there's another guy here by the name of Sykes. You think you guys are related? And he's like, I don't think so. But then he got to wondering whether there was something else that had that kind of direct lineage. And oh yes, gentlemen, your Y, we women are XX, I'll say more about that, you guys are XY. Your Y is your father's 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 Y. And it goes as far back as the 7 lines of women, all right? But there's some subgroups there. And one of them is in the Jewish community. There is the tradition of the priestly caste. And yes, there is a marker on the Y. You can pick out the people who are members of the priestly caste. And what's interesting is that there are 2 tribes in Africa that their history is that they came from Israel. And oh yes, the priestly marker is there in the Igbo tribe and in the Lemba tribe. Okay? So this connection. Now, you know, it wasn't that long ago in Scripture where we had the who begat, who begat, who begat, who readings. And those always puzzled me because I thought, who cares? And why did we bother with writing all that down? Because we only had papyrus and, you know, it probably took forever. But the reality is, I just told you why it matters. It matters to God. All right? You have a matrilineal lineage, and you men have your father's lineage. But this is also important because as we begin to experiment more with reproductive technology, you know, we have sperm banks and ovum donors and surrogate mothers. This is a huge issue because people do not know who their biological parents are. And it becomes a serious question for those that are conceived in that fashion. Okay? Now, let's talk about this XX and XY business. Let's talk about men and women for just a minute here. Okay? We women are XX and you guys are XY. Now, gentlemen, men often say they don't understand women. You're never gonna. I'm gonna tell you why you can't understand us, because we're so much more complicated than you are. But you just have to be cool and pretend, all right? So you gotta do, just pretend you understand. See, we women have 3,500 to 6,000 genes on each one of these X's. And we got 2 of them, all right? Now, this makes us really complex because if there's a flaw on one X, the other X picks up the difference, all right? If you know what a calico cat looks like, the orange and the black and the white and the stripes and those are always XX animals, always, okay? Now, this also means, for instance, if there are identical twin girls who have identical genetics, guess what? They don't have identical bodies. Why not? Because they got 2 X's. And when their body was forming, these X's randomly took over. So girl number 1 may have X number 1 in her heart, but girl number 2 might be X number 2. If you have identical twin boys, you are identical. Your body develops in the same way because there isn't this competition between the 2 X's, all right? Whichever X isn't being used is stored in the body. It's called a bar body, all right? Now, gentlemen, you're a little simpler. All right, you got your 3,500 to 6,000, but you know on your Y, yeah, you've only got about 72. All right, but this means you are actually the more fragile sex. All right, because more baby boys are conceived than girls by a lot, and they die in utero at birth, in infancy, toddlerhood, boyhood, and adolescence. And by the time we get to adulthood, it should be about a 50-50 split. There's usually 51 males to 49 females. However, in our world, we've tipped this in some places. In China, in India, and North Korea, they practice sex selection abortion. They have so severely tipped this that there are just way more men. Now, historically speaking, when men are that dominant in a society, they are going to go to war. And usually they go to war looking for women. But the problem there is that we have three cultures with the same problem. All right? When there are too many men in a culture, the testosterone continues to rise and the society becomes much more aggressive. All right? So we have tipped this in a very serious way. We know that some of the fallout of this now is that there are already girls being sold into effectively sexual slavery from some of the other Asian countries because there are no women to marry. All right? So that becomes a really serious issue. Now the other thing is, you see, if your mother's ex has a problem, for instance, color blindness, or some genetic diseases, you are going to manifest that disease because you do not have another ex to make the difference. So it will show up because there's not a protector equal here, all right? Here, I might be a carrier, but it isn't going to show up because the other ex is going to balance that out, okay? So this awareness of the differences, it's all about complementarity. As I talk about this, because now I'm going to talk about male-female brains, one's not better than the other, we're just different. And that's what we have to appreciate. That's how God made us, okay? God made us to be complementary to each other. But God also made us to be one in marriage, to become one body. And I'll talk about how that does come to be, okay? Now, let's talk about male and female brains for just a minute. Because if we understand how the other one works, everything goes a little better, all right? These diagrams were the result of a conference I had, and it was a Catholic sister and a Canadian psychiatrist. He was a guy, and they sort of argued about men and women brains. And this is what they agreed on. This predates the waffle spaghetti books, all right? That's a guy brain. It's a series of boxes. For the most part, men are linear thinkers, and women are multitaskers. All right, for the most part. You'll get some men that can multitask and some women that are linear thinkers, but by and large, that's the difference, all right? Now, for a guy to get through here, he's got to go through all the boxes, all right? Why? Well, you see, when he was a hunter and he was out with the other men, he had to be absolutely single-focused because otherwise he's going to become lunch. He's not going to come back with the hunt, all right? Men, you are much better at reading men's faces. Women, did you know that? They're only 40% accurate in reading our faces. So we think we're being subtle. He didn't see it. Clueless, okay? There's some anthropologists that say if you really want him to pay attention, tears and threat to life will get his attention. That has to do with hunting, okay? So this awareness that men read men's faces 100%. Why? Because their life depended on it when they were hunting. They could not be chatting. They had to be able to look at someone and is it safe, is it not safe, what's going on, and be able to read a face. So men read men's faces and better than women. We women read everybody's faces, and I'll say a word about that in a minute, all right? This awareness of men, you guys have a testosterone dominance hierarchy. You guys figure this out when you're about 5 years old. It's the pushing, shoving, wrestling, all right? You know who the dominant males are. Why does that matter? It's hunting again. Somebody had to be the leader, and nature equips us with that. You guys get testosterone from being with other guys. It's a good thing, okay? And young men, you need older men to be in your life because they also set your testosterone level for when you're an adult, okay? It's important to know we need mentors in our lives, whether they're fathers or they're other people who become important to us. Now, I was doing a talk at a conference, and there was a principal of a school. And in this school, from kindergarten on, they have boy classrooms and girl classrooms. And boys, I need to say to you, you learn differently than girls do, all right? Oh, what a surprise, huh? Yeah. See, with girls, you can do this. Even kindergartners, you can say, take out your paper, take out your pen, and write your name on the paper. We girls listen well, and we can follow instructions. Boys can follow one instruction at a time. Now, this is not an excuse, gentlemen, but just so you understand. So if you say to boys, take out your paper, pencil, and put your name on the paper, how far does he get? Yeah, airplanes, spitballs, and just lots of possibilities, right? It's hard for boys sometimes to hear women's voices. So in classrooms, sometimes you guys are at a disadvantage with a female teacher. We women may be at a disadvantage with a male teacher because men speak louder and it sort of feels like we're being yelled at, all right? But the awareness, you men, young men, learn better when you're doing things with your hands and when you're moving around, okay? So sometimes sitting in a classroom is really difficult for you. When you're doing homework at home, you may not find it best just to plunk yourself down and sit. You might find that it works better to stand up at a table, in all seriousness, that you can focus better that way, okay? So, this is the male brain. Now, people, this is how guys shop, like hunters, right? They're going to the store to buy the blue shirt. They know the shirt's at Kohl's. They are going to go to Kohl's and come back with the shirt. We women go, don't you want a yellow shirt? Don't you want to go to Boston store? No, no thank you. No, I'll be right back. I'm going to go get the blue shirt, okay? That's hunting behavior. We women, this is what I call a triage brain, all right? We lived in that community with the children and the other women. We gathered food. They hunted food. You men have, in fact, most of you will be able to find true north if you're outside. It seems that you have the same kind of little magnetic thing in your brain that birds have that allow them to migrate. Why would this be? Because when you were hunting and when you were on the sea as sailors, there weren't any landmarks. You had to be able to find your way home or wherever you were going, all right? It's interesting, if you put men in a steel building, they lose their ability to find north, all right? So, you guys have this ability. We women don't have that ability. When you guys give directions, don't you go north, south, east, west, so many miles or whatever? Usually so. How do we women give directions? The gas station on the corner, a left, and then you go to the tree, you know, the really big tree, you know the really big tree? Oh yeah, I know that tree. Okay, we give them by landmarks. Why? Because we lived in a small community. We were gatherers, all right? And so we women have the ability to keep more things in our brain at one time. For instance, you know, the toddler has just gone out the door, the cat has thrown up, supper is burning, and I really need to go to the bathroom. We women can usually do this okay, all right? I have friends who say they're very careful when they have to leave their husband with supper and children, because one or the other usually fares better. You know? Where are the kids? Oh, I don't know. I forgot. Okay? Where's supper? Oh, supper's burned. Yeah, okay. All right, but this is when I'm given directions. I'm working out of this. All right? We were all in this area. The shopping issue, okay? Guys shop like that. How do we women shop? We shop, don't we? It's a process. Do we know what we're looking for when we go shopping? Usually not. It's gathering behavior. Oh, the shoes are on sale. Oh, white shirt. I need that jacket, okay? But it's not like I have it all planned out. I'm recognizing it. Because see, it's gathering behavior. When I was in this community, if the blueberry, I didn't know what was ripe, but the blueberries were ripe, so I come back with blueberries. It's the same principle, all right? But the awareness, again, that we're different in this. Women speak about 20,000 words a day. Men speak about, yeah, that's something else. Men speak about 7,000, all right? Except when we're in college. When we're in college, it's about equal. But you men talk about different things at different times. You guys like really specific words. We women, we just talk, all right? And what's interesting is that in our brain, you guys have a bigger brain. Women's brains are smaller, but they're more tightly compacted. But there are certain things, like you guys are really good at spatial stuff, all right? You guys want to manipulate things like toys and things, and from early on as newborn babies, you guys would recognize if there was a mobile that you'd been watching and somebody turned it, you know, like the other direction, you would recognize it as the same mobile. We girls are like, oh, look, looks different. I don't know, same thing? I don't know. But we girls don't even want to look at that. We'd rather look at faces. From early on, we baby girls will cry when somebody else cries. We are hardwired for connection. You guys, that it's just not part of how you hear. Okay? So the awareness again of this difference, okay?